Hello, guys. Good evening, and welcome to Fresh Friday. This is our new inaugural show, actually, and welcome to Fresh Friday for Soulivity. And I'm excited to talk about our topic today, which is not really a very optimistic topic to talk about, but it's something that's much needed, not only within the United States, but around the world. We're going to talk about suicide and suicide prevention and awareness. And I think it's very important. I've just been noticing on the news so many deaths of young people. And just over the past 10 to 15 years, I've known people personally to end their lives, seemingly were super successful, had everything going for them, but they had, either depression or addiction. There were many things, many factors. So I want to discuss that. I did some research on stats before I invite our guest in. According to the World Health Organization, there's over 700,000 suicides a year. That's not including the attempts that happen throughout the year, throughout the world, that is. And men are more successful at suicide, which sounds really weird, but that's another stat that comes out. And that in different countries, first world countries, if you will, the numbers are actually higher. You would think poverty and other situations would cause more deaths of suicide, but actually it's in cultures in the Americas as well as in Europe. So I want to discuss that. There are many factors as to why someone would end their life. According to the CDC, it could be a veteran, dealing with PTSD. It could be people in rural areas, which is so strange because I love the country. I find it very soothing. And we'll talk about nature and how that can affect you. Sexual and gender identity is another one. And the last one, believe it or not, the last two I would say is middle-aged adults. Sometimes people feel like they have nowhere to go after they've reached a certain threshold. So it's important for us to discuss that. I've seen personally in my own life, and I'll talk about my own experience of when I felt like I wanted to end my life in my 20s. And knowing where I am now at 50, I say to myself often, I'm like, just think, had you done what you thought about in your 20s, and the people that you wouldn't have met, including my nieces and my nephews, the career, accomplishments I have, the books I've written, et cetera, et cetera. So it just really, I hope that this reaches somebody, many people that may, they may have pause to think, the what if, beyond being 29 or 28 and thinking you want to end your life and being 50 and seeing all the things that transpired in that time, and last but not least, I want to introduce our amazing guest. Our first guest is Mora. She is, I want to read this correctly, a somatic informed spiritual counselor, and we'll talk about what that is. She's also an artist, a martial artist, and a super mom, and also a dear friend. I'll put that in there as well. We also have Elaine Clayton. I almost said Elaine Stritch, and I'll explain why later. But Elaine Clayton, who's an amazing international author, artist, and intuitive healer. And you will see behind Elaine some of her work, which I found immediately when I saw it very beautiful. So we're going to discuss many things. And of course, the publisher and editor and creator of Soulivity, Brian Johnson. So welcome everyone to Fresh Fridays. I want to invite my next guest, Elaine Clayton. She's an international renowned artist, author, and also intuitive healer. And I also want to talk about her new book that's coming up in spring 2022, The Way of the Empath. And I think that is a great way to start this conversation. Um, Elaine, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's an honor.
Yes. So I see your beautiful art behind you. And can you just tell us about what is you shared it with her, but I just want our audience to hear.
Okay, sure. I'd love to. Can you see it very well? Um, First of all, I like to go into a sort of trance almost while I'm painting. And so all these
Mhm.
colors and nature, you mentioned nature earlier and how much it has an impact on us. And so I just kind of go into a world that I create that has peace and light in it. It's
Mhm.
almost like trying to find the light in the darkness. Like the whole
Yes.
canvas will even be, really dark, dense, and then I just pull the light out of it. And it
That's
feels like what
amazing.
we have to do in life. Yeah, pull the light out of the situation. And in
Hmm.
this one, Eve kind of longing to be back in paradise. Like she had a glimmer of what paradise was. And I feel like we have glimmers of what paradise is because we know what it feels like when we're loved. I mean,
Hmm.
someone somewhere along the way has loved us, or we had a moment where we felt valued. And then there's
Hmm.
all this other time in our lives where we're not always feeling that way. So we
Yes.
long for home, don't we? We long for it this whole time that we're alive. Um,
Yes. Very true.
yeah.
Very
So,
true. And I
mhm,
noticed that, part of the reason I opened with your art is that I think art is very healing and art is
mhm,
intuitive, correct? And
mhm,
in intuitive healing, you kind of know when someone's sad, you know when someone's really up, and you also can know when someone's about to like end their life as well. It's a
mhm,
feeling, it's an overwhelming sadness that an
mhm,
intuitive healer or an empath would feel.
mhm.
How do you go about seeing your clients when it comes to Reiki healing and intuitive healing?
Oh, that's a big question. This whole topic is so big because that's the last thing you ever want to sense or hear someone say is, I am suicidal, or I feel like I don't want to be here anymore. And so it feels like taking that person and holding them as the most precious, like pearl, that you've ever seen or felt, and try to help them uh, realize that their worth is beyond measure, and that it's felt by us, and that core inside of them, that who they really are can't be degraded or destroyed no matter what else is happening. And so, you do your part, you do as much as you can. And I realize sometimes there are so many things happening to someone, like you mentioned, environment is so important. You could be feeling really isolated, or like if you live in
Yes.
the urban area, too much noise, maybe you don't have enough
Mhm.
nurturing in so many ways.
Mhm.
And then a physiological event, it could be at some point, you know, more than just the mind not shutting off. So sometimes you can't be sure you can talk someone away from
Mhm.
their thoughts. It's
Right.
bigger than
Mhm.
just that, right? And that's the saddest part. So we could intervene sooner, and care for each other before someone gets to a crisis point.
Right.
But I think that we all, in empathic work and intuitive work, healing work, we're trying to merge with each other before we get to the point where the mind cannot be shut off. and
Yes.
and
Mhm.
it's, yeah. And I even think sometimes the way we talk about it, I just use the word suicide, and I get a cold shudder with it. And I think
Yeah.
because
Yes.
it takes us to a terrible place. But I also kind of think that when we say commit suicide, it sounds
Mhm.
like a crime. And
Mm.
um, so, and it is a crime to lose a person, because we're unique. We're a miracle. That person who feels like ending it all, there is no other, and never will be there. Never will be another just like that person. And so
True.
that alone, that's a miracle right there. So to end
Mhm.
it is, big. It's not a small thing. But there's almost a judgmental attitude, I think, sometimes towards
Yeah.
mental health, towards depression, and towards someone taking their own life, like after the
Yes. Mhm.
fact. So I feel like talking about it like saying they took their own life, more than saying they committed suicide. It's a subtle thing, but
Right.
I don't know, dehumanizes
It's
them a little bit.
acknowledging the person and not just a lump sum of
Hmm.
suicide. What's interesting is that I was talking to a friend. He's an actor, model, and a minister actually. His name's Dunny Reiser, and we were talking about when we say to people, "How are you?" You know,
Hmm.
do we really mean "How are you?" And I have a tendency to look people dead in the eye and they get
Oh,
uncomfortable sometimes. I'm like, "How are you?" And I really mean it, and then sometimes they'll truly open up. Most times they will. Sometimes they'll like back and won't address it.
mhm,
But
mhm,
I think it's important. We talked about this earlier about being empathic and how we wish when we were younger someone really said, "How are you? How are you feeling?" Because I literally could
mhm.
feel things as a child,
Yeah,
and I would understand. I remember seeing a cousin once, and I started weeping, a deep
mhm,
pain of weeping, and I couldn't understand it. I'd walked over to her house, this is in the South, to give her a message. My mom could have picked up the phone and called her, but she had me
mhm,
walk over. So I walked
mhm.
over, gave her the message, and I got this profound sadness. And I wasn't delivering a bad message. And then a year or so later, she had a stroke, a massive stroke that she had to
Mhm.
relearn everything. And I think that's what I was feeling.
Oh,
I
yeah.
understand it now. I didn't understand it then. So yeah, I think it's important to
You
check
know,
in on people.
I think so too, and even with the way you said your mother could have picked up the phone and called her, but she sent you, that feels angelic to me because you don't know how that what that gave her. You
True.
might know, but we don't always know what it gives
Mhm.
someone, like the fact that she sent you as a child there, the presence of you with her. Um, she may have been in a way she may have been feeling some of what you were feeling, but maybe didn't verbalize it
Mhm.
yet, like the mounting sense of what may come, because sometimes you can feel
Yeah.
physically a little bit off, and somehow you
Mhm.
did pick it up. And it may not have only been precognition, it may have been at that moment there was more going on with her than on the surface. Do you think?
Yes. Yes. And being able to
Yeah.
feel it as an empath, I definitely, we will discuss this definitely a lot more and we'll talk about your healing practice, but I want to bring in Ife Mora to talk about somatic trauma therapy. She is a somatic informed spiritual counselor, let's be clear. And Ife, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much, D'angelo, for having me. Soulivity, Brian, and so lovely to meet you, Elaine. I just think the work that you do is so important. Thank you
Yes,
all.
thank you. Thank you. Ife, I know that I'm going to be seeing you very soon. So to talk about the effects of what trauma can do to each and every one of us. Can you explain to everyone exactly what you do so it's really clear?
Sure. Well, my journey is an interesting one. I started off as for 2 decades a musician, singer, songwriter, producer, performer. And I've always been a spiritual counselor in the Buddhist traditions in my Buddhist community. And one day, a few years ago, I woke up with a spiritual awakening to stop doing music and to become a healer. Um, and that for me was this began an incredible journey. And from that, I learned about somatic work, somatic experiencing, which is a modality that's created by Dr. Peter Levine. I started training in that modality. I'm a martial artist with a background in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and Muay Thai. And I wanted to learn how to approach that from a trauma informed place, to be able to work with people, teach them Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, teach them how to defend themselves, empower themselves through that practice, but come from a place of a sensitive one. Most people who are, especially women, who are drawn to those type of combat martial arts, like myself, are survivors and have a background in trauma and being traumatized, some sort of traumatic event, and want to learn a way to empower themselves and to feel safe. So I became trauma informed certified and bring that approach now to um, martial arts as well. Yeah.
That's amazing. Amazing. So an
Mhm.
integration, protecting ourselves spiritually and physically, if you will, and emotionally. I can imagine that. I remember talking to you, this is around New Year's Day, I believe, and we were talking about giving um, your pain in your body a
Mm.
color or a shape.
Yeah.
I won't disclose the other friend that was there, but he had made a comment, and I both of us kind of like shuddered, like we jumped because of how he described it, the color, the shape of it.
Mm,
And I stressed to him after we left, you guys, you don't know this, but I was like, you should definitely, you should definitely see her. You should definitely see her, because I felt like he almost was having a premonition of something. And I really think often in our own lives, we do have premonitions of things, and we give it shape, we give it color, we give it power, whatever it is, trauma,
yeah.
pain, being a survivor. Um, so can you explain that process? Because I was really fascinated that you were asking, can you give that pain a color?
Sure. So that's
Mhm.
coming from the modality of somatic experiencing, created by Dr. Peter Levine. And the practice is that when we've experienced a trauma, which is a trauma can be defined by something that's happened to the body too fast too soon, or the organism too fast too soon, that's overloaded our system. So our survival mechanism can't, it overloads our survival mechanisms, which is called our fight or flight, or sympathetic nervous system. So it's happened too fast, too soon. And one of the ways we cope with that is we learn to dissociate. And that is part of our
Yeah.
surviving that traumatic event. It no longer feels safe to exist within the body. And that's where somatics come in, because soma, the body, somatic work is about going into the body and healing the body, allowing the person to be in the body, feel safe in the body, and start to understand where that trauma exists in their body. Um, we understand that trauma exists within the nervous system. It's trapped in there. Trauma is energy that's trapped in the body. And so, what somatic experiencing does, and other somatic treatments, is it allows you to go in the body. The practitioner allows you to go in the body and start to really kind of describe, to first of all, to feel safe in the body. So you're there. And I like that you asked the question earlier, how are you? With this emphasis on D'Angelo,
Mhm.
with this emphasis on really connecting to the person. How are you? Because one thing that Peter Levine says is that it's important to be this empathetic witness. Just
Mm,
one way of
powerful.
healing trauma really is for someone to just personally connect with you and empathize with you. And Elaine, you are this empath, and D'Angelo, you're an empath. And, so we know what it really means to be that really truly empathic witness, or empathetic witness, where we're there connecting with the person and from a genuine place. And I think that that's like the first step to helping someone heal trauma from the body. Um,
Yes.
so
And
you
mhm. No.
no, so anyway, just to finish it up, so going to the body, it's important to start building a relationship again with the body, understanding how
Mhm.
to experience, from Dr. P. Levine's modality, somatic experiencing, experience the body. So as you go into the body, where's that pain? And then what does that pain look like? What does it feel like? What are the sensations? Is it
Mhm.
icky? Is it sticky? Is it sharp? Is it edgy? Is it warm? Is it cold? And then what colors do they have? Is it dark, light, purple, gray, greens? What shapes? And then from that, beautiful imagery starts to come up, archetypes, meaning. And from that, people start to feel safer in their bodies. They can experience what it's like to be in their bodies. And then
Mhm.
all that stuff starts to build resiliency. So you can be in your body, feel resilient to stay in your body. And as that starts to happen, people start to have a discharge of trauma.
Mm.
They start to rid the body of the traumatic event. This allows the traumatic event to stay in the past, where it should have always been in the past. So they don't continually relive it over and over and over again, and experience triggers with invisible threats. Um,
Mhm.
and then this clears out space. And with that clearing of the space, and rids the body of this trapped energy. And so with that space, all sorts of things become possible. You know, hopes and dreams and visions of the future and happiness and all sorts of wonderful things that are our rights as human beings become possible. But because that trauma is trapped in the body, we can't really see it, feel it, hear it, experience it, because we're so overwhelmed by these traumatic events that we're living over and over and over again.
Yes. And interesting with trauma, and I know this personally, I know this through friendships and family, that if it's not dealt with, it can manifest, as you said, Ife, in our bodies. With chronic pain. Your friend, she has chronic pain that can't be explained. The doctors can't explain it. And I feel like if trauma is not dealt with, it leads to suicide. It leads to isolation. It leads to severing relationships, whether they're friendships or love relationships, with a partner or a husband or wife. So I think trauma definitely has to be peeled back like an onion, right? Figuring out what it is. You may know what it is, but not, as you said, reliving it over and over again. Not letting that be your narrative. Like, oh, this is me. This happened to me, but you keep telling that story over and over again. It's like, how do you get past it? And Elaine, I see you shaking your head as an intuitive healer, and someone who works in many modalities. How do you look at trauma?
Well, I love everything you just said, Ife, because the volume of pain does have a shape and a color, and it does get trapped. And I actually think that we spend our entire school lives pretty much in fight or flight mode, because there's traditionally always been win lose kind of mentality, not so much compassion and empathy, but making the grade or being humiliated or getting the star and all that. And so on subtle levels, we can carry so much. And then the things people say to us when we're growing can be stick as though that's who I am, even though the person who said it might not even be alive anymore. And one of the things I do with and for clients, there's two different ways to have it, but it's intuitive stream drawing. So it's closing your eyes and using your non-dominant hand to draw really freely, like you do when you're a child, when you're not self-conscious, and that way you're present in your body. You get to go somewhere else in your mind. Not your mind doesn't own you, and of course the mind is always reminding us of, oh, I was so stupid, oh, I did that, oh, he did that, he hurt me, whatever. It's a trap kind of. And so when you're freely creating, since we're born natural creators and mark makers, just that's kind of who we are, you get free from that. And then so there's a way to use it therapeutically. I don't really like to use that word. I don't know what to say, how to use it. It's for creative expression. Let's just say that.
Yes,
Because
that's
I don't
great.
really want to,
Mhm.
say we need therapy. There's a connotation with that, which shouldn't be there, but it's more fun than that. It's just absolutely just to enjoy your creative ingenuity that we each have. And then sometimes people come to me as an intuitive, and they'll say, will you do an intuitive stream drawing in honor of something bothering me? And they don't tell me what it is. I'll just say, yeah, I would be honored to do that for you. As you said, both of you, we have to approach each other with sincerity. And one of the ways we can do it is in a creative way, through these healing modalities. So let me see if I can show you. There was one string drawing. So when I do it, so let's say I put the person's name at the top of the paper and then just enter into a sacred space, asking for whatever would best benefit them to come through me. And then I draw with my eyes closed, and then I look at the stream drawing. I've been doing them about 15 years, and one of my books is about this. But anyway, it takes a shape of past, present, future dynamics, because
Hmm.
we're either in our minds hurt by the past or influenced, or we have overcome things, so we get credit for some of the things that we've experienced, or we are worried about the future. And then when we turn the drawing, you can see like a chakra chart, like from head to toe, where we keep the energy inside of our
Ooh.
bodies. So, like in this one drawing, for example, um, right in the center, let's see, this would be, crown to root. And right in the center, you
Mm.
can see a sort of box. It's like I colored it yellow.
Mm-hmm,
When
mm-hmm,
we turned it this way, it was oops, this way. It was had to do with the
mm-hmm.
relationship manifestation that's present. But when I turned it to
Interesting.
the chakra chart, yeah, the box there was real symbolic because the person that I was talking with had been given ideas about you stay in the box or you're out of the box. You're either um, correct or you're wrong. You win or you lose, and you culturally or whatever it is, we do that to each other. We have
Mm-hmm,
ways in which we declare, and then the ego does the same thing. For her, it
mm-hmm,
was in her solar. So it was like the feeling to be safe, where all your organs harmonize, to be safe and to feel harmony. She only knew that she had to conform to be rewarded. And so it was affecting her pretty much everywhere. And then when she had a relationship, she had to get that person to be a conformer also. So it was a
mm-hmm.
beautiful conversation about just getting a little above the situation. So I think that's partly what all these modalities do. They help us get a bird's eye view, but at the same
Yes.
time, they ground us within our bodies, like to feel good
Yes.
inside as a creator or as a healer or as one being healed, you know? I don't know if that made
You know,
sense, but
it does make sense. And Ife, I know that you do also chakra work, and that has a lot to do with how we are healing, you know. I know for me, I saw an intuitive coach during 2020 towards the end. So all the traumatic situations that were going on in 2020, as we all know, um, I just felt this like heaviness, like everyone else, but I felt it in the center of my body, and
mhm,
it was in my heart chakra for sure. And it's a online kind of session with this young woman, and she knew it. She's like, I'm feeling a blockage here in the heart chakra, you know? So how how do you kind of create an alignment, with the body, the alignment with the mind and the spirit?
Yeah, well, with the work that I do, I will a lot of people feel this tightness, this constriction in their chest
Yes.
and their
Hmm.
shoulders and their neck, where the spine, um, and all of that, is the heart chakra, and that is, I work in a lot with the area a lot, like opening it up and naming it and understanding it and what it feels like looks like and what sensation it has and just I work on like kind of opening up and I really love this topic and I think that this topic is so important of suicide and prevention of
Hmm.
suicide. You know, Elaine, what you're talking about brings up the idea of shame. And I think that,
Mm,
shame is something that
powerful.
we don't really talk about very often. It has such a
mhm,
stigma to it. But shame is something that is really important to look at. John Bradshaw talks about healthy shame and toxic shame. Healthy shame
mhm,
being something that helps us learn to be social because, we're mammals and so we're social creatures. So healthy shame allows us to learn to be, better social creatures in our societies. But,
Hmm.
toxic shame is that thing that really, it puts us in these spaces of feeling like we have to be perfect. Like John Bradshaw says, we, are human doings and not human beings.
mhm,
That we
Mm,
have to, always work, 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 never really take care of ourselves. We're always like
very
living the
true.
image of someone else's expectations. Um, and we're feeling the pain of our parents' pain as well. If, also, for example, the ACE study, when we're talking about
Hmm.
ACE, the adverse childhood experiences,
Hmm.
what that means. trauma, all the research and data finds that people who really experiencing trauma are coming from the family unit, from people who love you, care about you, attachment, people who are supposed to be taking care of you, and then actually end up
Right.
harming you. And the effects that
Mhm.
have on a child, also women who experience it in domestic abuse. And abuse doesn't just have to be battering; it could be emotional and verbal as well. And men
Mhm.
experience it well in a similar ways. Um,
Mhm.
you know, adverse childhood experiences are a number one public health concern, because the little children who are abused grow up to be people who are part of the system. We talk about, the preschool pipeline to prisons. These are
Right.
children who are dealing with abuse and who are dealing with societies that haven't protected them and cared about them, and allowed them to live good qualities of life. Children who are abused grow up to be adults who need so much out of the system, need so much health care and mental, emotional, physical health care,
Mhm.
assistance. So this is a concern for everyone. We talk about how to prevent suicide. How we prevent suicide, it starts with the child. It starts with
Yes.
protecting the child, teaching parents how to better parent. These old, ways of authoritarian parenting are really outdated. We can't continue
Mhm.
to parent like our parents parented us. These are just creating
Right.
traumas, intergenerational traumas, repeating over and over and over again. You know, these things of isolating children when they've done something wrong, or punishing them, this punitive way of approaching parenting, is outdated. It creates trauma. um, children who feel this shame of, I'm a bad child, I've done something wrong, there's something wrong with me, and there will always be something wrong with me. They continue to carry this through a lifetime. So
Mhm.
we need to think about the child and how to protect the child, so this child doesn't grow up thinking that there's always going to be something wrong with them, that they have to be perfect, that they have to conform in a way that is unnatural for themselves. And think about, like, how we can do this as a society and community. How can we start to help children and protect children, and in these cycles of abuse and shame, toxic shame and trauma, and learn how to better parent, giving the child agency, protecting them, teaching them how to believe in themselves, teaching them what it means, the authenticity of who they are, teaching them it's okay to be empathic, to protect their feelings and protect their unique abilities. um, so I think that when we think
Yes.
about suicide prevention, that's what we have to
Mhm.
start with that.
Yes, and not passing along generational trauma, generational curses, I call them. I think
Mm.
many of us do, or many of us are products of it. So it's really about severing that and healing that. And it does start at a seed level, the child. I watch how people parent. I don't have children, and I try not to judge how others parent, but I do. Sometimes I'm on the train, let's say in New York City, and I'll hear mom, chastising her son or daughter and saying some really harsh things to them, like maybe cursing at them, yelling at them, intimidating them. And then they wonder as kids grow up that they're behaving in the same manner and may end up in the penal system or in an abusive situation or the abuser. It's a cycle, and it's a generational thing that has to end, not only within our country but around the world. Children should be protected. They're not often protected. People say they're doing it, but the stats don't show that. There are a lot of people who are dealing with trauma in their adult life and way into their late adulthood. So I want to thank Brian, Johnson at Soulivity for creating this platform to talk about passion and purpose and just living the best life. So Brian, I want to bring you in on this conversation as to just thank you first and foremost, and thank you for allowing us to talk about suicide, because I think very important. Being a survivor of sexual abuse, I know what trauma has done to me, and I know how I've worked through it and continue to work through it. So I have no shame in it. That's why I can speak about it, you
Mhm.
know. But also, I think it's important to state to all of you, I can disclose that I felt suicidal in my 20s. I'm 50 now, but I was at a point at one point in my life where I was definitely gonna do it. I like had the window, I knew exactly how I wanted to do it, and I had a spiritual moment where I felt a
Mhm.
spiritual energy enter into my home and literally hold my face like a mother would. And
Mhm.
I sobbed, I released the thought, and I just started living my purpose. Basically, saying that I'm moving back to New York. I'm going to do this. I'm going to write books. And just honoring whatever creative emotions came through and making manifested them. So thank you for manifesting. So living something that can touch people because it's not just for the US, the world. So
Mm.
thank you first and foremost.
Oh, well, thank you for that kindness and those kind thoughts. It's funny as I've been listening to everyone speak so many beautiful truths that are
Mm,
also supportive to people out here already that may be watching this. Um,
yes.
the first thought that comes to my mind is the fact that there's a collective trauma that all of us
Powerful.
feel. And it was very apparent when Regina King's son transitioned through suicide and the
Mhm.
effect
Hmm.
that it had on the world,
Hmm.
and how everyone had their own specific reaction. And I think that points to something both, well, actually, all of you have said, and that is we're reflections of each other,
Yes.
Mhm.
and pain that we have in our own lives, regardless of whether or not we have gone through processes that you, Ife, and you, Elaine, have talked about to
Hmm.
heal and to move through that pain is in our past. So there's a resonance that's there,
Mhm.
that when these things happen, it reminds us of those moments in our own life. And so there's
Yes.
this collective energy that's happening. And I think that the importance of that is for everybody to recognize that this is something that all of us have to deal with, that
Mhm.
there is a movement that can happen around us, shifting and changing the paradigm around how
Mhm.
we deal with trauma itself. You
Mm.
know, I keep thinking about in my own life, my mother, my biological mother, was manic depressive.
Mhm.
And when I was very, very young, she was in and out of the hospital.
Mhm.
Well, that her trauma, based upon her life as a child,
Mhm.
created a parent that embodied that
Mhm.
trauma, which now gets
Right.
passed down to me and my brother, where now
Mhm.
what are we supposed to do? Well,
Mhm.
bless my father and then my other mother, my quote unquote stepmother, who decided in their own lives that the cycle had to end, that they had to deal
Mhm.
with
Yes.
their own personal traumas based upon their lives. Even though both of them had what people would say is great childhoods, there was still trauma there. There is no such thing as a perfect parent, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And they had us look at and get support to break the cycle so that we could start breaking and create a new normal. Now, it doesn't mean that the other stuff isn't there. I think Ife, you talked about this, right? Where that trauma is in the past, and I think Elaine, you talked about this too, where the trauma is in the past. What you're
Mhm.
creating is a choice of how you're going to deal with it. How are you going to deal with it? I think John Bradshaw, I mean, I love John Bradshaw's books, by the way. I'm glad that you mentioned them, Ife. That you never know how a child's going to react to things.
Right.
Most of the time, they embody it. They
Yeah.
say, this happened and it's my fault. If I was only a better
Right.
child, then mom and dad wouldn't have a divorce, or mom or dad wouldn't leave, or whatever. And then
Sponges.
that,
Yeah.
exactly. And then that's the decision that we make about our lives. And then we relate everything to that: our jobs, our relationships, our children, driving down the road. I mean, everything is focused on that one decision back in the day. And so um, I think it's important that everyone realize that we all have it. Even if you think that life has been great,
Hmm.
that we're still trying to turn this corner, and that it's a process. And when suicides happen and we're all affected by it, it's a reminder of that truth, that we're all
Right.
still was trying to change this paradigm, or we're pushing
Hmm.
ourselves into this new paradigm.
Right.
So I, I
Yeah.
That's
this is tough. I mean, this is work. This is the work, right?
No, it's a real conversation, and triggers and tools are the things that kept coming up as you guys were talking. We all have triggers, right? I had one recently. My mom sent a text and it triggered something to all of her children. And I didn't like the tone of it. And I normally haven't reacted in such a long time, but I reacted. So it was a trigger. But then I have the tools to go, oh, I shouldn't have sent that. Actually, I shouldn't have reacted. I should have like picked up the phone and called her, which I did yesterday. I called her and I said, hey, I apologize for my, gut reaction in the text and how I went in and there was no reason to. And she explained, she's like, oh my God, I didn't mean it that way.
Hmm.
I was like, oh, okay. So it's totally diffused. And my mom's a psychology teacher and, she's very well versed. And so am I, and so are my siblings, but it triggered all of us, which is interesting. So, triggers, what are our triggers, right? And triggers can lead to drastic actions like suicide, you know? But if you have the
Absolutely.
tools that Ife is offering, Mora is offering, and that Elaine is offering, and there are many resources out there, if you have those tools, you can avoid suicide. You can avoid having a trigger reaction to something, or regressing to
Yeah.
whatever feelings you felt as a child or as a teenager, and really move forward with healing. And I think
Hmm.
this is a purpose of this, not only to talk about suicide prevention, but also to the healing process, and not only for anyone who's watching. I think it's for all of us. We're progress, right? We're works in progress. And that's how I
Yes.
look at my life. I'm like, I'm a work in progress. Sometimes I have amazing days and weeks, and sometimes I'm like, eh.
Right.
But as
Yeah.
Ryan knows, and Ife as well, that gratitude is an essential part of my life, So I wake up before I even started this today, 10 to 20 things I'm grateful for. And that literally triggers something in my brain that gets me through the day in the most positive way. So any negativity that comes at me, I'm able to like almost like it's called a mind bending, or when you're bending the elements, it's like literally someone will do something or say something and I look at them and I literally bend that element right back at them, or
Oh
I
yeah.
dissipate it. I'm like, you know what? I'm grateful for this lesson, but I'm not going to receive this energy right now, right? Grateful for the experience, but understanding that this experience could trigger something
Hmm.
that's not
Hmm.
healthy. And to both of you, Elaine and to Ife, what do you think about triggers and tools? I think what you guys do are the tools to teach people how to work through trauma and to work through having suicidal thoughts or trying to commit suicide. Sorry, Elaine, I know.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, I love
So
all of this. It's so important. And what you said about the text matters a lot because we're in this 3D world and then there's this cyber universe. So things
right.
get communicated. When Chesley um, took her life, one of the things that stood out was she talked about how trolls online had really
Mm,
demeaned her,
Mm.
had said she's not beautiful enough. She's not, you're
Mm.
not this, you are not this, and you are not that. And so we're negotiating our inner children, the earliest impressions that were nonverbal, like you said, we embodied it. Adults don't say, honey, I'm an alcoholic and your dad's bipolar with no medication because they're not diagnosing it yet, but you know, they don't say
mm,
anything. We're just in it. And these are
right.
generational. We spiritually, we take themes from the ancestors and we work them
Mm,
out as we go, right? And that's kind of our lot. But it's one thing to do it in a 3D world. It's another when you have this gladiator tear everybody down, toxic shame environment on
mm,
the internet, that when you are alone, isolated with only that internet screen telling you all this stuff, it may not be that it's your grown-up self who knows how to bend, negativity and all that, and who became Miss America and a lawyer and lives in a high rise and has made it and all that. It's not that person, it's that inner child, or one of them, that is so stricken that at that moment it's overwhelming. And I think we need to be, I don't know what to do about that, because we're in it now, and it's people
yes.
love to just take each other down. I don't know what to do exactly, except for we just keep managing it as best we can, and we just keep doing the work that we're doing, and hoping that we can help raise consciousness, I guess. And like you said, I don't feel like I'm perfect. It's a work in progress for me too.
Mm.
Yeah,
Ife,
absolutely,
the
Elaine.
tools. What do you think the tools are?
Yeah, so I love, D'Angelo, what you were talking about your morning ritual and meditative practice of gratitude. Because in terms of like how we think about the brain, we are basically rewiring the brain in that way. So any type of association you have during the day where someone might trigger you, and that trigger then brings up something from your past that then affects your nervous system, that sends you into this fight or flight response. You've rewired the brain with that daily practice to think of it in terms of not a threat, but something
Mhm.
that is more than what it appears to be. And you understand this as a reflex because you're doing that daily work. It's affecting not only your spiritual space, but also like your physiology and your brain being part of that physiology.
Right.
The tools, I work with a organization that families who are affected by law enforcement. So um, a lot of families whose family members have died in prison, killed by law enforcement in prison and outside as well. And the majority of the families are Black and Brown families. And what I teach them to understand their physiology, they're very well versed in the law because they're fighting to change policy. They're fighting social justice causes to change things in our society that are extremely unjust. I teach them the ways of understanding your physiology. Um, so if there's something very powerful, Brandon, you were talking about you really knowing John Bradshaw's work, and he talks about like naming the thing. Once you can kind of name the thing and understand it, that in and of itself gives you so much power. So you're
Mm-hmm.
naming it.
Mm,
What is it?
Absolutely.
It's trauma, it's shame, it's a lot of these things. Okay, let's name it first. And then let's begin to understand what it's doing to your body. So we have this like autonomic nervous system that controls the fight or flight, sympathetic, and rest and digest parasympathetic. What is that doing?
yes.
So
Mhm.
when my heart beats fast and my palms get sweaty and my pupils dilate, I'm ready to fight or to flee, like the prey in nature, and
Right.
being
Right.
chased by the cheetah. And that's our survival. That's our survival mechanism. And all mammals have it. It's our oldest system.
Yeah.
So understanding that, knowing, okay, what's happening when my heart beats fast, and what's happening when my sympathetic nervous system is activated, and so I must be experiencing some sort of threat. Okay, let me think about it for a moment. Is that threat real? What's happening right now? What's happening in my environment? What's happening within myself? I was triggered. Oh, okay, that just like D'Angelo, you were saying that the process you went through with your mother in the text. Oh, okay, so the threat
Mhm.
really isn't real, or the threat is just this, and that's a trigger. Where does that trigger come from? Okay, and understanding it. And that's when we say in trauma work, a top down. So we're thinking about the prefrontal cortex and understanding
Mhm.
it in a cognitive way. Um, and then like feeling it from the bottom up in your body, what's happening in the body as you're experiencing that. Okay, so I don't really want to be in this space. It's too activating,
Right.
it's too intense, and all these colors and darkness and feelings are coming up for me. How can I get back to this kind of homeostasis? How can I get back to parasympathetic rest and digest? Let me
Mm.
do some calming things.
Yes.
Let me
Yes.
calm the nervous system. I can be in
Yes.
control of this. I can be in
Mm.
control of the way my body responds. I can be in control of the way my mind responds to
Yes.
threats, and to, because a lot of times they're invisible threats. They're not
Mhm.
really there. It's just the trauma that's trapped in our nervous system is responding in the way it should. It's doing its job, but it's not. It's doing it too much. It's overly active because of the traumatic events that we've experienced in the past. Continue to allow
Yes.
our physiology to believe that the threat is still there and the threat has
Mhm.
actually passed.
Mm.
So, I
Yes.
teach people and I teach the families, let's pay attention to your body. Let's understand like what your body's doing. And from
Mhm.
that, you're then, parents are then able to teach their children that, or they're able to recognize that in their children. Oh, my child was having a physiological response to something. It's not their fault. It's not their fault that they're reacting in this way. For example, my son, he was becoming a bully at school. And I'm like, oh my God, my son, like I'm this Buddhist and I'm, working trauma, and how could he? But I had to take responsibility for that because I had become so busy with all my work and all my, human doings and not human being, that I had to take accountability and say, okay, let me look at him and pay attention to what's happening. Oh, he's getting like triggered, and his body's going into fight or flight. What's going on there? So I went back, taught him the tools, start allowing him to, like, if you feel this response, let's just start to calm down. Let's think about it. Let's do some deep exhales to calm down the nervous system, bring it back to homeostasis, parasympathetic. And then let's also start taking control of your life.
Right.
D'Angelo, I love your gratitude practice. And what I do is the I am practices,
Mhm.
affirmations are very
Mhm.
powerful.
Mhm.
So I start
Mhm.
teaching him the I ams. I am balanced. I am powerful. I am focused. I am clear. I'm smart.
I
I
am
am
kind.
wise. I'm
Yes.
Mhm.
compassionate. I am kind. I am thoughtful. I'm respectful. And so we start implementing this practice every morning and every evening, and then the shift started
Beautiful.
to happen.
You
Beautiful.
know,
The shift started to happen.
D'Angelo and everyone, as you were talking, both you, Ife, and Elaine were talking about this, I'm thinking that one important aspect that I think people need to understand is that if you don't become self-aware, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't
Mm.
do these practices that keep you aware, the decision that you made in terms of embodying this trauma as a kid will run the show. The kid is going to run the show. And that you're
Absolutely.
going to put yourself in situations, you're going to be attracted to situations that keep this going over and over and over again. And
Mm-hmm.
you're not even conscious of it. You're just thinking that, oh, this just happened. And it's like, no, you literally found the place that
Mm-hmm.
you're going to relive this cycle of pain that reminds you of the pain that you experienced as a child.
Exactly.
And so it's important to do the things that all of you are talking about, because when you
Mm-hmm.
start feeling that energy, when you start getting physical representations in your body, That's your signal. That's the whisper. Hey, you're triggered. You're about to go down this path again. Let's do some affirmations. Let's start doing this
Mhm.
other things. And I also thought about one thing. Catherine Tristan, who was on one of my shows in 2019, talked about this one thing that was so simple. She said, "Turn it off. Turn off the TV. Turn off
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
the.
Yeah.
Put your phone down.
Cell
Don't
phone.
go on the internet. Put on some
Yeah.
music that you just love. Do something creative. Like I
Mhm.
love the words that you're saying. Short circuit it. Short circuit
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
You're creating
Yeah.
that new normal. You're calming yourself. I mean, Ife, you were talking about the physical kinds of things that happen in the brainstem, that fight or flight. You're turning that off, and you're accessing other parts
Mhm.
of the brain. You
Mhm.
know, to bring pleasure instead of getting afraid and you're like waiting to fight somebody. You know,
Mhm.
Yeah.
or get fearful.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
Well, one of the
Yeah,
Thank you
tools
so
absolutely.
that
much.
I was
Mhm.
thinking about the tool of, can I just demonstrate something really fast? Because it's so
Sure.
easy.
Mhm.
So, like,
Mhm.
you know how symbolic that blank piece of paper, if I am a creator. I am born a creator. And I can change this however I like. And I can change it in a way that gives me good emotions, not negative. So if I just act like I'm 2 years old, close my eyes, non dominant hand, because I don't have any control, and then just, this feels so good, just expressing like this, changing this thing, you know, that's an immediate thing we can do. And then you can gaze at it intuitively, just enjoy it. You might use color and go in there. You might turn it around. You might start seeing things in here. Like if I look, I get playful like a child. And that's such a happy place. I start seeing people in here, and what are
Mhm.
they doing? And the next thing you know, I'm just in this awesome daydream. So I made a shift, but I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to think. I didn't have to. Also, it gives me calm because it's like the martial arts. It's like your process too. I think we're doing kind of similar work, very much so. It's physical, but it's reinforcing, a kind of creative uniqueness that we have that automatically just takes us to a calmer place. And so, I look for whatever is the simplest. Breathing is one. Sometimes to tell someone to meditate is kind of, oh God, I don't want to sit there and do that. And every thought, every dumb song I don't like anymore is in my head and whatever. But to just do a little action that feels good takes you there, you know? And then the breathing
Thank you
does kind
so
of calm.
much.
Yeah,
Thank you
Elaine,
so
that's
much. I just
wonderful.
want to
And
say, mhm. Ife? Mhm.
no, I was just going to say, you talking about the inner child is so powerful because that is exactly what we need to be thinking about is, our inner child. How can we protect the inner child? And as we're protecting the inner child, how can we protect our own children and other children in our communities? And I love your drawing exercise. In somatic work, we have the similar drawing exercise, and from that, looking at the drawing and understanding what's happening in your body and really feeling what you're experiencing in your body, as you can concentrate on the drawing that you just made. Um, that is it's so powerful, so beautiful. And the I am again is such a powerful two words because it really is like, thinking about neuroplasticity, where we can actually rewire our brains as we are saying I am. And I think that's what I was able to do with my son, rewire his brain. Well, he did it for himself, actually, rewire his brain.
Mhm.
Like, I am actually kind and compassionate. I am actually a person who's able to connect with the humanity of another child,
Mhm.
and really understanding that we're able to be more in control of who we want to be as a human being. Who we
Yes.
want to be, what kind of person do we really truly want to be, living up to our fullest potential as a human being.
Yes. I think the whole idea is really about being whole and holy. I often say I am whole, which means I am holy. You've come to a
Mhm.
place where you're fully evolve. Your one thing about what Elaine is talking about and what Ife is talking about and Brian is that it's free association, whether it's drawing, whether it's writing, whether it's dance, whether it's music. It's a way to embody what's going on with you, and then to look at it, analyze it, and move forward, and hopefully to heal and to prevent something as devastating as suicide to for yourself and also to your family and friends. I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to really talk about this. I think this will be very powerful, and I'm going to send it out into the ether, into the universe, and it will save lives. I know that for sure. And we do have a suicide hotline. It's 1-800-273-8255. And not only is it for people who are having a mental health crisis. Also, it's for vets with PTSD if they're in a crisis, which I thought was an excellent addition to the hotline because I feel like it's very much needed in this day and age. So, thank you, Elaine, Clayton, Ife Mora, Brian Johnson, and thank you guys at Soulivity. And this concludes Fresh Friday. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, thank you again for tuning into Fresh Fridays and to just talk about suicide prevention, and to my special guests, Elaine Clayton, also Ife Mora, and Brian Johnson. And we will have links here for the suicide hotline, as well as how to reach my guests if you want to talk or have a session. I just think it's important that we really check in on the people we love, and we check in on our coworkers and just the people around us. If you get a sense that they need a little bit more, invite them out to coffee, take them to dinner, go for a walk, go for a hike. Because sometimes people just need contact, and not so much isolation, which COVID has brought to all of us. I just want to leave you with a few things that I got out of this conversation. The free drawing that Elaine talked about, and just connecting to that other side of herself and allowing ourselves to be free. And then when Ife talked about, the I am exercise that she did with her son and that she does with herself, I think it's very important. And then my practice of gratitude, and just all of these elements are ways to free us up, to open us up, and to protect us, and also to make us aware what we're thinking and how we're thinking. Because sometimes when you're in a suicidal episode, let's say that you get all this negative self-talk that happens. It's just like a turning wheel, and you have to figure out how to turn it off, because if you don't, it leads to devastation, either an attempt or a successful suicide, which is, we don't want that. We want all of you souls to be here. So thank you again for tuning into Soulivity and Fresh Fridays.